Hello there, and welcome to the Iron Canon Podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, especially the High Republic tonight, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I am joined across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. I got myself a last-minute Christmas present. I got myself this fancy Andor t-shirt and this fancy Andor cup that was given to me by a good friend of mine from the downtown Disney Star Wars Trading Outpost.
Right on, right on. It's a great show. It seems like you like this show.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, right on, right on. Also, Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you had a fun and safe and enjoyable New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and all that jazz. I'm gonna get this up here. There we go. Got this banner here, but I'm gonna switch over in a second. But this week we are again going into High Republic Convergence by Zoraida Cordova, talking about the characters and themes and ideas and possible hints about future content, including the Battle of Jeddah, which comes out in 4 hours on Audible if you pre-ordered it. We also have some more thoughts on canon, as well as talking a bit about a show that is I'm calling Star Wars adjacent. First up, before we get to that, I got the plugs. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Twitch at Ion Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Thanks to everyone following on the Star Wars Underworld Facebook and Ion Canon Twitch, Star Wars Underworld Twitter, Ion Canon Twitter. Appreciate all the love, all the views, all the engagement. A few ways to engage with us, of course, in the comments here on YouTube and Facebook and wherever else you're watching. And of course the comments will stay there even after we cease going live. But also, we get in Twitter and Facebook and the Discord server at the Star Wars Underworld Discord server. Got a live link at the bottom in the description below that you can use to get into that server. Joel's there, I'm in there, a bunch of us are in there, chatting away, having fun. I think we're going to do another video game party in a few weeks, taking a bit of a break on that, but definitely feel free to join us in there. Also, we are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, the audio versions, if that is more your speed, as I like to say at the end of the tractor beam when talking about digital comics or physical comics. Tractor beam, my weekly comic books reviews. This past week, last week on Friday, books come out on Wednesday. I review them by Friday. This Friday we had that Santa sleigh load of comics. We had 5 in total. That's the record for new Marvel Star Wars comic stories. And they were all pretty doggone fantastic, including, of course, Dr. Aphra, number 27, High Republic, I believe, number 3 by Kevin Scott, and High Republic, The Blade, number 1 by Charles Soule. Definitely, please do check that out. I'm much appreciated. It's a great time for paper canon in the galaxy far, far away. Okay, Joel, let's bring up this week in Star Wars. You had some thoughts, you had some musings. Take it away.
This really is my musings in Star Wars, less of a week. But yes, in my week of thoughts of musing Star Wars, I've been thinking a lot about, Star Wars and how it operates as a canon, as a franchise, as an IP. And this sort of interesting thing that I think Star Wars has that I don't think Marvel has, DC doesn't have. Well, DC's all over the place. But we won't get into that. And that is, in kind of this weird sense, Star Wars is, but also is not this one story. It's not one linear story for sure. Like Marvel is a linear story. It is Iron Man to Endgame with like the exception of 2 movies, all forward timeline. Star Wars, you have the original trilogy, then we went back to the prequels, then we jumped to the sequels. Well, we had Clone Wars in between, and now we're kind of just all over the place. We got Mandalorian in this era. We got Andor and Kenobi kind of in the dark times. We got High Republic 200 years in the past. We're going to have Acolyte, which is 100 years in the past. And it's like, they're one story in the same way history is one story. Like, Queen Victorian era leads into World War One, which leads into World War Two. But it's not like, Andor, Kenobi, and Din Djarin are going to show up at the end of this epic movie and fight Thrawn or Thanos together, It's not going to be that epic moment kind of a situation. And I've just always found that sort of fascinating about Star Wars in the discussion, especially in our speculation of like, is this going to connect? Is this going to connect? And Star Wars is but isn't one story. I mean, under Lucas it was, because everything George did was, it's like different creators are telling different stories and they kind of build off each other. Like Dave is building off his Clone Wars stuff. If Tony Gilroy came back, I would assume he would build off his Andor, and he is building off Rogue One. The High Republic
Mhm.
team is building off themselves because they're doing the initiative. But it's not all one grand thing that's leading to an epic confrontation with Palpatine Thanos 2.0 again. So yeah, that was sort of just my thoughts on how Star
Mhm.
Wars has operated, especially in this new era, as we are getting lots of on-screen book and comic content. So exciting times ahead.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially the way jumping between eras, the way Star Wars can and does all the time. It really affects our perception of continuity and our perception of things connecting or not, right? One thing I will say is you do bring up that within the story there are certain authors and creatives who like to. I mean, the example I think of is Charles Soule,
But yeah,
who
great example.
yeah, who in the Lando comic introduced Moment in his mask, picks that up in the Darth Vader comic. Um, in that Darth Vader comic, he introduces the Barash Vow, picks that up in the Blade, and how we know this character Barash Sylvain. Uh, the backstory for the vow and the probably tragic backstory for that. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's these kind of corners of the sandbox that they work with. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, you have that. And I mean, everything with Fortress Raider and the Knights of Ren,
Yeah.
including even in the Crimson Reign. How
Yeah.
they end up going into the fortress itself, and um, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I mean, that's kind of an option on the table uh for creatives if they want.
And then I'll just say, then you got your
Mm.
James Lucinos of the world who are like, look at everything and just like, I'm gonna make a story that ties everything from soul stuff to
Mhm.
full do this and this and this, and then that's how you get Plagueis. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's
Yeah.
sort of my weekly thought of Star Wars and continuity.
I mean, I guess the one thing I will say is there is at least what Rise of Skywalker brought is this underlying thing of the Palpatines versus the Skywalkers is,
Yeah.
and you can maybe say, okay, they're just riffing it from Marvel there, but it had to. I mean, Rise of Skywalker, I think, had to
Mhm.
make something big and culminating in that way. But
Oh,
that's the thing.
mhm.
Another thing about that is the story can then continue on after that.
Oh
There's
yeah.
no necessarily an end point in the same way that with the Infinity Saga, there's this definite thing. Then the story continues, picks up
Mhm.
on things that you know from the two captains' stories, right? Captain
Mhm.
Marvel and Captain America happened
Mhm.
before. Uh, Captain Marvel, especially picking up on things in this new saga, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's just not. You're right. It's not the same. I guess the only analogy, similarly, might be you have the age of the Republic and the age of Rebellion and the age of Resistance and or roughly around the three trilogies and the age of High Republic and
Right.
but yeah, it that wasn't planned out the way Kevin Feige planned it.
No, I'll say this though, I wouldn't be surprised if in many years' time, a bunch of characters we meet will retroactively be said, "Oh, they were there at the People's Fleet. Din Djarin was there. He was there on Exegol or that." Retroactively, we'll say that
Probably,
they did that with Kaz in the
yeah,
novelization. So
that's true. Oh yeah, I mean, and it did it brilliantly. I mean, it's funny you mentioned why can't Andor show up in Thrawn? Oh right, because he's dead. I mean, that's another thing we've
he's
seen
dead.
seen this character die.
Yeah.
I can't survive that. My week, kind of getting into Willow. Gonna bring that up a little bit because it's Star Wars adjacent. Actually, I mean, it's a George Lucas story, so it's there. But there are some interesting parallels there of especially I saw the film. I finally saw the film for the first time, and because I
Mhm.
hadn't, it was a fun, exciting film. Getting into the series a little bit, it's a little hit or miss. I'm finding, but um, you know, of the Lucasfilm properties, of all the live action Lucasfilm properties, I am finding it the weakest because it's trading in a lot of tropes, and it is kind of odd that you got something like Andor, which is so perfectly made, and then Willow, which is good but not great,
Different
made
creators,
in the same studio. Sorry, good.
different creators doing different
Different
things, I guess.
creators, yeah, that's true. But different creators, but the same studio and the same oversight and everything. So that happens. I mean, yeah, and you have Indiana Jones also coming up. So yeah, I mean, it is feel. I mean, Willow does feel like. I mean, they even had the like the hidden caves and the scavenging for ancient relics. It feels like more also Indiana Jones adjacent. But anyways, Star Wars adjacent in this hero's journey, this rogue, these rogues, and this smaller character departing, and I'm talking about the film, Will himself, Will Lovegood. Yeah, it's similar story almost to Luke in that he has to depart and find his power, and I mean, also taken from The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. But it was, the film was definitely enjoyable. Some things kind of dated, but you can see where the connections again with the hero's journey in a fantasy medium, in the historic fantasy medium. I kind of imagine them breaking out some lightsabers and seeing, I mean, there was that April Fool's thing years ago that pretended that Willow Lovegood, he ends up leaving that planet, makes his way through the galaxy, and then finds his way on Tatooine in time for the Boot to Eve to see Anakin Skywalker win the Boot to Eve race. Because of course, Warwick Davis is there in his face on the Boot to Eve. But that was a funny in joke. That's not canon. That's not real. That's just a joke. So that was my week in Star Wars, kind of taking it easy, enjoying the new year and all that.
Nice.
So I don't know if you have you been able to see Willow or.
I've never seen Willow, but it's something I really should. But it's like it's one of those weird things. Like I never. It was like I love Star Wars and I love Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Willow's like the third one that I've never gotten into. Which is weird because I do love fantasy. I mean, granted I kind of just like Lord of the Rings, but in terms of like fantasy, I mean, I like the genre. But in terms of like the big fantasy stuff, Lord of the Rings has always been the one I like the most. But no, I've always Willow is an interesting one because I feel like it's just Star Wars without the spaceships and without the technology. It's just full on wizards and swords and sorcery, and kind of even with that kind of cheesiness, to it. Like where I think Lord of the Rings, Narnia, they got a little bit more of the religious theology, bombast, mysticism. I've always heard Willow as kind of a bit more. Kind of more just cheesy fun. Like it's got good story, but it's like it's not the battle of satanic and gods. Just Warwick Davis doing his thing.
It's intentionally goofy.
Yeah, and I've heard mixed things about the series. It's written by Larry Kasdan, John Kasdan's son, who did Solo. I mean, Solo's fine, but I think that's because Ron Howard was the director. So that's the showrunners. When it comes to showrunners, it's always more the writer who's more important than the director. Not that the directors aren't important, but that's just kind of how the TV side of things work. Don't ask me why. I don't know. It's just how it always shakes up. But Will is definitely something I've got to really watch just one day because I think it's gonna. It's cheesy, but it's of its time. It's before the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movie kind of refresh things, and Willow's always been an interesting one to me. So cool.
One last thing I will say with the show, it's building in these anachronisms in terms of dialogue and kind of, I mean, knowing what's happening a little bit in young adult novel space in terms of fantasy. I mean, I don't fully know. I haven't read much of anything. I've read a bit of E.K. Johnson's non-Star Wars work. I've read one of her books. It kind of, it just trades in that kind of contemporary, queer fantasy, which is nice, which is interesting. I am kind of confused as to where they're going with that main couple. When plays Memphis Nest, blanking on her name again. I'm blanking on a real person's name now.
I know. I like it. I'll say
and
this.
Then, No, I'll just say it's weird because they have them kiss at the beginning, and then they build up romantic tension throughout the series, throughout the show, at least until where we're at. But they had them kiss at the beginning. Are they trying to just cover their bases and avoid the queer baiting charge in case they don't end up together? I don't know. that seems kind of strange to me. So yeah, I mean, it's good to show a good queer story on screen like that. I mean, Star Wars hasn't had the guts to do it yet. So they're good marks to Willow for that. But yeah, it's yeah, interesting, curious to see where they're going with that relationship.
In terms of this could actually be more of a week, something I did this week in Star Wars. In
Mhm.
terms of the YA thing, it's interesting. A good example of kind of seeing how this has affected Lucasfilm properties is the sequel trilogy.
Mhm.
Because I was talking to a friend of the show, Omar, um, and we were talking about how Hunger Games, I think, I don't know if you ever got into Hunger Games,
Yeah, I watched
has
some films at least.
has affected the sequel trilogy. And I remember hearing somewhere that
Mhm.
Lucasfilm, when making the sequels, they really wanted to pull on that Hunger Game fandom, which
Mhm.
I mean, I was out of the Hunger Game thing, but it just exploded. And I can kind of see kind of the tropes. I mean,
Mhm.
young female lead, Kylo Ren is kind of the bad boy, but you kind of feel for him. All the characters are young and impressionable and like very sexy, very good looking. Lots of tension
Yeah.
everywhere. Who's gonna kiss? Who's gonna, and I think, there's a lot of that kind of those sort of elements pulled with the sequels in particular, in terms of
Mhm.
like, Hunger Games with a big thing. We're gonna kind of take our cues a little bit from that series and from those books. And I think maybe Willow is pulling again, not from just the young YA queer fantasy like a She-Ra, which I think did better because it was actually a queer person writing it.
Mhm.
But also just, kind of a Gen Z kind of
Yeah, for sure.
young millennial kind of storytelling pulled into it, which I don't know. It can be done well and it can't be done well. So, just because you're pulling a trope, you can do it great or you can't do it great. I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, what played with tropes. It's a little indie film that came out in 1977 called A New Hope.
Mhm.
It played all over with tropes, and look how well it did. So, we're still here today,
Mhm.
40 how many years later, talking about Star Wars. So speaking of Star Wars, there was a new book that came out a few months ago. We finally finished it. We're going to dive into talking about High Republic Convergence by Zoraida Cordova. I have it right here. Here we go. That's
I have it on.
Gela or Gela. I don't know how the audiobook's pronounced. I'm going to say
I
Gela.
heard Gela. I remember
Gela,
Gela.
the audiobook said Gela, so I'm correct. Okay, good. Uh,
I would
it's
assume
pronounced
Gela if it was a
Marchila.
J,
Once
but
I read.
I would
Yeah.
assume Jella for the J, but then again, it's Star Wars, so you never know.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the GEL. Anyway, interestingly, not really the most fleshed out character of them all. But anyway, we'll dive into that. Uh, I'll give opening thoughts, and then can go back and forth with this. I found it to be the most effective. I'll say well constructed. It's hard to say my favorite in terms of emotional connection. I did enjoy it a lot, but just thinking about how Zoraida Cordova was able to construct this novel. She was very clever and economical with it. That's a compliment. I don't mean clever in a bad way, because there's a lot of complexity in it. There are four main characters. It's still an adult High Republic novel, same as Light of the Jedi and Fallen Star and Rising Storm. That level of complexity, but I found it so much clearer with the character motivations and their origins and their development and the interactions between them. It was just so much easier to follow. I do think Claudia Gray's Fallen Star achieved this as well, especially you had Stella and Elzar and Bell. But like I said before, this novel, more than the other three adult novels in High Republic so far, really nails that balance I found between uh, a character driven story that feels big, that feels significant, especially because I think about the importance of the Forever War and Aram and Arano and how everyone's has their attention on it, and we can go back and forth about that. But and we can discuss about that. But yeah, it gets that balance. I found um, does so by. I mean, she was very creative. She pairs them up, has two sets of pairs, kind of quasi romantic storylines, sort of, not really. They're not really actually romantic, even though she wrote Crash of Fate, which was a romance that maybe wasn't as successful. And incorporates a Jedi and three adult children of heads of state, and so the tensions involved in that, um, and then of course the balance that is achieved. There's a balance that is achieved. The balance between uh, I found between the character driven story and the kind of the larger complex historical story, which again I think Light of the Jedi especially struggled with uh, trying to tell a historical story in a novel form. This in Convergence, I found it that the pairs themselves represent or embody or seek to affect the resolution of historic conflicts, right? As being children of the firstborn, not the firstborn, but these adult children of these heads of state, um, and then a Jedi Knight. So Axel Greylark is, of course, the son of Chancellor Keon Greylark. Uh, I found he represents the Underworld. And by the way, we're going to spoiler everything. I'm going to spoil a big plot point here. He also
Spoilers.
represents the path and the path of the open hand, the Nile, the chaos that they seek to bring. So there's Axel on the other end with the Underworld and the path of the open hand, and Gela representing, of course, the Jedi Order and the Republic's order. And we'll get into those pairs in a bit. That pair, and then of course Ziri Alberon, who's the daughter of the monarch of Arano, and Fantu Zen, who's the son of the monarch of Iram, and these two planets that are locked in this forever war because of their proximity. I found it explores the transforming. Here's the theme: explores the transforming power of convergence, of encounter, collision, yes, but also encounter, encountering people you didn't expect to encounter,
Mhm.
people you've pushed away, you've set aside, and the possibilities that those open up. Especially since Ziri and Fantu are both really wanting peace,
Mhm.
even though in light of the legacy, their parents' legacy of war and conflict. So I found that really fascinating, really successful. Joel, what are your overall thoughts on Convergence and how well you think it stacks up to other High Republic novels?
I think I like Path of Deceit just more overall. The book, I found it a little bit
Mhm.
more. I mean, I listened to this book a little
Yeah, I
haphazardly
agree.
myself, so it's like, I got a little
Mhm.
lost in places. But I can't speak because that's just me. Because I listen to this on Audible. I don't read the books.
Right.
I actually just get it on
Mhm.
Audible because it's cheaper. Um,
I mean, that counts as reading to me, but
That's
fair
yeah.
enough.
I mean, that's just how
Yeah.
painted. I do
Mhm.
enjoy the conflict. I like the idea of like the two planets kind of at that are not part of the Republic at war. I think it's
Mhm.
one of the more interesting things of like you can have it's Star Wars, so yeah, kind of need the war, but it doesn't have to be a galactic
Mhm.
war. Just here's two planets at war. It's a big galaxy. You can just have a local problem. Um,
Mhm.
it also kind of adds to that whole historical thing of like there hasn't been a full scale war since the formation of the Republic. A line have
Mhm.
attack of the clones. So it's like, well, yeah, full scale war doesn't mean a lot of
Mhm.
little wars and mini wars. Little crises.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of the characters, I think I liked Axel the most. I found him the most memorable. I
Yeah.
got a little lost when it's like, oh dang, he's part of the past of the open hand or was, and then became it again. I'm like, oh, okay. I got a little lost there for a second, but that just might have been me.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
Gela was kind of like she was fine. I didn't think she was as memorable as like you know Kevmo was.
Yeah.
She was just kind of like, oh, she's the Jedi. She's the Jedi character. Um,
Yeah.
sadly, I don't remember much of the princess and the prince of the planets who were getting
Interesting.
married. They were kind of the most like I don't remember them. I remember like there was like a little Padawan and like the older master who were with the Gela,
Mhm.
but that was about it. Um,
Yeah, it was at the beginning, but yeah.
yeah. Um, I do think it's interesting, kind of the conflict of the forever war between these two planets, and obviously the past doing its thing. The mother's up to her old
Mhm.
tricks. Of course, I remember the mother showing up, like, oh dear,
Yeah.
that's not good. But I love the mother.
Yeah.
I think she's my favorite character. I think she's my favorite High
Yeah.
Republic character. Period. I love villains
Interesting.
like her.
Mhm.
I like the chancellors quite a lot. I think the Corn Chancellor was a little more ambitious
Yeah,
and gun
Molo.
ho
Yeah.
about, and then the human one, Greylark, Chancellor Greylark, a little more cautious, but also a little.
Mhm.
It's like a. I wonder if this was written during Andor, it might be a little Mon Mothma with like good politician, but got family issues clearly going on, um, and a lot
Yeah.
of baggage going on just in general with her family and stuff that everyone needs to deal with. It's a family counseling therapy time. Yeah, I think reading Path of Deceit first has helped kind of just with the context of it all. With like, okay, I know what the Path of the Open Hand is. Like, 'cause that was such a good introduction to that group. Like, I know what's going on. Just seeing characters like get so devoted to the mother. Like when they're failed, it's like oh no, mother, I'm so sorry. Like help out. Like I love it.
Yeah.
Overall, I thought the book was fine. It certainly was a little bit more expansive. I don't think it's as that expansive in terms of
Mm,
my thoughts of the galaxy, but it's like in terms of like here's the crisis of the day is this two big planets that are at war. I
mhm.
thought that was certainly the most interesting conceptual concept of it for
Yeah.
sure. I do enjoy like the inklings of the pairings between like Gela and Axel. But I don't think
Mhm.
it went as far as I thought maybe it could go. Maybe not in terms of like romance, but in terms of just developing it and looking at it and examining it. I felt like it was like, oh,
Yeah.
it's there, and then they kind of went on to do other things.
Mhm.
But yeah, I thought it was a fine book. I think they're all great, but all good books. Like I don't think they're
Yeah.
one that's like, oh, this is bad. I never think I've ever thought
Sure.
that.
No.
But no,
Yeah.
it's
Sure.
another fine one. I think I like Passive Deceit so far just a little more. I think that's been my favorite.
I mean that tracks with phase one, and that the YA novels are just an echelon just above. I find, except
Yeah.
for I Love Fallen Star, but yeah. One thing I'll be curious to hear at the end of phase two is, but even you mentioned how you've read Path of Deceit now. Are you gonna be able to get to Battle of Jeddah or
I mean, I'm sure I
eventually?
will. I mean, if it's on when
Yeah,
it comes on Audible, then yeah, of course. I don't know if I
it
want to
comes
listen to
out
Quest
in
of the Hidden.
3.5 hours.
I don't know if I want to listen to
Yeah,
Quest of the Hidden City first or not, though. Like I've been
yeah,
doing so good, I want to kind of get ready.
yeah. That's a question, but I mean the thing is, uh, reading more and having just being more consistent with getting to it than you were at phase one. And for other folks, I'm curious to hear how people react to phase two and respond differently, because if they're able to be on board more, that's just one of the fan reaction curious things I'm curious about. One thing about the that Forever War, and why, and we'll get to that more in a bit, but why I found it a little larger scale, partly because it's there, it's the thing we're focusing on. I asked the question, why do the Jedi and the Republic care? Why does the Path care uh, about that? I think it's something I'm gonna get to at the end. Because there's uh, some questions sorry, for Battle of Jeddah and for Cataclysm coming up. So
Oil.
yeah,
That's
it's
why.
something
Yeah,
that,
I'm kidding.
well, yeah. I mean the chaos, but yeah, we'll get into that. I think we can get to, first of all, talking about Axel and Gela. Sorry, one sec. There we go. Uh, and yeah, like you mentioned, yeah, Axel is definitely the most layered of all these characters, most deeply written. He is going to feature more in Cataclysm, I believe. I mean, at least he's on the cover. We'll get to the covers in a minute, in later too. Um, yeah, he constantly buckles at the strain of his mother's shadow. It's this interesting thing where uh he's I mean, he really dives into, just similar to with Stellan in phase one, dives into celebrity and themes of celebrity and the champagne problems, as Taylor Swift likes to say, of what it's, being the Coruscant playboy of the galaxy, and how uh yeah, I mean, how he's expected to support his mother's career, be a public figure who doesn't want to join. He isn't a joiner. He isn't actually part of the path. At least he wouldn't say he's part of the path, because he's not a joiner. He never commits like that. And and part of that, and a big part of that, and a great way ways Rada Cordova showed this was through the past pain of his father's death and the tension. It's clear that he was the among the parents, the father was the good cop, and Keon Greylock is the bad cop parent there, as just about all parenting couples are, and that father's death really affects him. That as when he's younger. I forget how old he is, but he's definitely younger. And this brings up an interesting point. Clearly, I gather this was written after Clone Wars season 7 aired, but maybe some ideas were stirring there. Um, the circumstances after Axel's father's death, with the Jedi rescues Axel, but has to leave his father to die, and the Jedi say, "Oh, it was the will of the Force." It's just as is the Force wills it. This very non-interfere, non-committal pat answer, not consoling or comforting at all. Just accept the circumstances. See ya, goodbye. It really thought of the Martez sisters. I really considered that. Um, the very similar reason for them to resent or distrust the Jedi. Here's the thing: I thought about this a little bit. The different time period means that the Jedi have time to get better. That with the Martez sisters is what, 3 months left for the Jedi Order. There's no time for them to get better.
Nope.
With this, there's 350 years, and around there, or maybe more, right? 300 whatever math years. Even by phase 1 and phase 3, there's already then this activist faction. They're clearly more active than we're used to in the time of the late Republic, and it's this interesting rising point. And that, of course, I think the end of phase 1, that general retreat in the face of the Nihil, is this point of saying, "Oh, we have tried to be more active in the galaxy, and we got slapped for it. We're all going to retreat into the Coruscant Temple." But there's, I think just like how Jorah Malley in Light of the Jedi, that council scene is this thesis statement, the tensions of it. Should the Jedi be more activist and present and confronting the threats of the galaxy, or should they be more resistant and conservative, for lack of a better term? That tension exists. I mean, that's even with Qui-Gon and with Ahsoka, but very much an active conversation all through the High Republic. And I thought it was interesting just the way Axel's story reflects an earlier and then later perspective of kind of pat answers, non-interference. Kind of a little bit what the Path of the Open Hand does a little bit. Accuse or wants to see that the Jedi can't control the Force as they will, but Jedi arrogance. So first of all, I'll stop there. I've said a lot there. What did you think about Axel and his resentment of the Jedi?
Yeah, I love Axel. I think he was probably the most interesting character, as I say before. I don't remember. Did they say why they couldn't rescue his dad? It's like, is there a specific reason, or is it just they just couldn't get to him?
I think he was trapped and he was gone. The only way to save Axel was to let his father die. That seems to be the objective, reasonable perspective, but Axel isn't capable of seeing that.
Yeah, there's always, there's a certain amount of acceptance you just got to deal with. But I think, it's like if someone dies, it's just like, well, will of God, will of God. It's like that doesn't help at the moment. It's not how you grieve. Maybe got to accept things as well. But like that's not, don't go the whole act God thing. That's like, it's like can't just go will the Force, goodbye. No therapy for you. There you go.
Yeah. We're not going to pay for your therapy.
No Greek counseling for you. Yeah, and I think that's always interesting, because I think that you have that kind of little too much, and it's kind of need to realize, hey, people are upset here. They're angry. This is kind of the one thing about the Jedi, and we could talk about this. I could probably think of a whole discussion of anger, fear leads to anger, hate leads to hate leads to suffering. And that is truth. There is truth in those words. But anger at the moment is sort of like, well, let people be mad. Like, I think we have, especially these days, there's your emotions are valid.
Hmm.
As long as you're not negatively affecting people. If you're mad, you're mad. You keep, those are don't go. Oh, you're angry. That you're going to turn into a Sith Lord. Like, no,
Hmm.
that's not how most of this works. And there's a whole discussion of whether the Jedi should learn the nuances of emotions in that respect. Um, in terms of the interventionist, I kind of wonder, and they don't go into this at all, but I kind of wonder if this is sort of like part of the. This has always sort of been the history of the Jedi, where it's like if let's just go with what we knew when back in the Legends days, if like there were Jedi armies led by Jedi lords against massive Sith fleet forces and pro and Jedi chancellors ruling the Republic during those great battles. It's like
Hmm.
that's as interventionist as you can get with the Jedi, even more than the Clone Wars at the time, probably. Like or full on Jedi lords and Jedi kingdoms. Um,
Hmm.
Legends got weird, and like we can't necessarily put that on the current canon whether they're going to go in that direction, but they've hinted at the fact that there were Jedi armies that battled the Siths in ancient times, and this is obviously still the galaxy still recovering from the last
Hmm.
big war against the Sith, and everyone thinks the Sith have been wiped out. So I think
I mean,
that's
the Battle
always
of Malachor is that great example, right? That
yeah.
we haven't fully explored yet. Hopefully, we do one day. But yeah, sorry, go
I
ahead.
hope so. No, I hope so. It's like it's sort of like like maybe the Jedi kind of now are in more of a retreat period of like they're still reeling from that. And now,
Hmm.
by the time they get to phase one, they get a little bit more confident in themselves to like, okay,
Hmm.
we have a lot more people. Let's actually do some stuff. Let's actually just maybe even circumvent Republic sanction and just go out to these planets and help them ourselves. We got force powers. We got to do something.
Hmm.
And then they retreat again, and they clearly kept retreating this time till we get to the Galactic Republic and the prequel era, and then that allowed it got so bad that it led to Order 66, and well, the rest.
Yeah.
So I do think that could play into it, but obviously this book doesn't really go into that too
No.
much. But it's just certainly something I think about when you brought up all that, and kind of it's an interesting thing. And I think actually the character who needs counseling, but I think I could say that about every Star Wars villain. Like, I
Yeah.
need some good counseling. I think his mom and him need to sit down with a counselor. I think he
Yeah.
needs. I think they all need a little. They all kind of are dysfunctional family.
Hmm.
Either she's a great politician, great dysfunctional family, sort of a
Yeah.
thing going on. Sort of like Mom Martha's family, dysfunctional in a
Yeah. A
sense.
little bit.
So
It's
I,
a great
yes,
parallel.
I found
Yeah.
her. I found him the most interesting character of the bunch.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I do think Kiev Trennis. I still keep on wondering if she's going to be that last burst of no, we got to be out there. We got to actually help people. Then we get to Dooku in Tales of the Jedi, where he's completely the Jedi are just useless, and I'm going to leave, which does lead to the dark side in his case, but not necessarily in Kiev's case, not in Ahsoka's case. So yeah, that's always this interesting tension that is played out personally, and Axel plays out personally. Gela, by the end, oddly enough, I just thinking about this now. I mean, she wants to declare to be a way seeker, so maybe there's something in that. Maybe something in that one to be free to be more active, free to be able to meet young little Axels and their parents, to help them in ways that a knight can't, and or a master can't, and so yeah, maybe
Uh,
something to that. We'll see. We'll see if
I do.
Gila do good.
I do have one thing that's another bit of speculation of, and that is, as communication is kind of the biggest theme of the High
Mhm.
Republic era. Um, and historically speaking, as in our modern times, the more we become communicated, well, obviously, yes, a lot of people like you, me, Matthew, you're in Canada, I'm in Southern California to talk and do this
Yeah,
podcast. In terms of organizational structure, it also kind of creates the incentive for more centralized control over
true.
individuals. Where it's like, back in the day, it's like if you're at war, like the Roman Senate can send a general, but it's like the generals. Well, you gotta trust the general to do his thing. We can't really
Yeah,
command, but now we have command and control centers,
yeah,
which in modern warfare is necessary. But in the case of the Jedi Order, you know, that's this idea of communication and a more centralized Jedi Order. that allows,
Mhm.
if Yoda says, to the temple we must go, not interfere anymore. That he has more
Mhm.
control over the Jedi Knights in the galaxy. Like, hey, get back here. You're gonna follow the
Yeah.
Yoda way, or else. I mean, I don't want to make Yoda like this dictator, but
Is
it,
Yoda? I mean, it's
it's the
Predator
council.
uh in the end of phase one, but
I mean, the
it's the
council.
council as a whole. Yeah.
And the kind of council kind of encroaching on
It's
the
true.
kind of individual
Mhm.
aspects of knights. And I'm sure, as a theologian, you probably have these discussions like, hey,
You
how
do.
much should the Pope be telling the churches of South America to, toe in line here? Like, how centralized should or the whatever religious organization you're part of should be?
Mhm.
And, I think that's also another reason why the Jedi had their problems because they got too centralized in one place. And when you can march on the temple and take out all the Jedi in one big explosion, then you know
Yeah,
that doesn't help your order compared when you're spread out
that's
all
true.
over the place.
Yeah. It's like, well, what Kevin Scott said about how communication in phase two in this era is
Mhm.
spotty. If you
Yeah,
want to introduce tension, have someone break their phone
yeah,
or lose their phone or whatever. It's uh good plot point. But in this novel, all this is expressed personally and in Axel's grief, continued grief, and just he's a mess.
it,
He begins and ends the book in prison, um, but in very different places in terms of the self-made walls that got him into prison in the first place. And he ends the book pretty broken because of his encounter with Gela. He he begins the book just getting into trouble, drinking, uh, punching out a casino uh, master, whatever owner, casino owner, and his mother has to come and bail him out, literally bail him out. At the end, where he's revealed, he's opened up, even to Gela telling his story. um we see him more open because or just he opens up what his connection to the path of the open hand is. uh he's still wrapped around the mother's finger even though he deny it. Call She calls him his chaos. Yeah, he ends up definitely broken, and it makes for this interesting comments that I think if it was Rada Cordova or whoever had it in the High Republic show. um Lydia King is gonna have to try and fix him, whatever that means. Can he be fixed? uh Interesting question there. Do you have any final thoughts on Axel himself as a character and him being broken?
no, it's kind of sad, but sort of like it's like just different types of broken. First, he goes into drinking, and
Mhm.
now he's sort of broken and finds himself in a nice little cult because
Yeah,
the mother's
sure.
taking advantage of him. So it's like, you need help.
Mm,
You need a nice support system, people who
mhm.
actually care, or him to
Yeah,
open up to
sorry.
that as well.
I mean, I think
Uh,
he's broken maybe in a healthier way at this point, and you have to be opened up in order to actually begin healing. So there's that. Does he end up turning good? It's possible. That's the tease at least. Interesting with Gela. One last point there is, she the reason she isn't necessarily as memorable as Laird, she really is just the foil for Axel in this book, and,
mm,
and maybe that was a bit disappointing, especially since she's on the cover. You think she'd be have more to do. Maybe she has more to do in Cataclysm because Axel's on the cover. I don't know. Um,
they should have reversed it
yeah,
then.
yeah, it is interesting. I mean, the back of the book they have her quote here. I mean, this is Axel asking her, if you weren't a Jedi, what would you do? Would you be free to run off with me and have our beautiful romance? And yeah, she says, if I were not a Jedi, then I would not be who I am. And that I mean, part of it, yeah, I mean, she's just a foil because she comes from a place of strength and clear character already, which isn't necessarily bad. It just means of the four, she just isn't the most well-rounded. And again, everything else worked and fits so well around her that I didn't mind it. But um, yeah, I guess it could be more. Maybe I don't know. I can't decide because there are four characters. One of them, I guess, had to inevitably take a bit of a backseat. Um, four pilots. One of them had to let it go. But anyway, we have lots of great Jedi characters, like you said with Kevmo. So, yeah. Any last thoughts on Axel and Gela before we move on?
No, I am curious to see where their storyline goes and kind of
Mhm,
where they end up. They certainly are kind of a pair. A pair.
mhm.
I hope that Gela gets a little bit more to do or a little bit more insight into the next book, though, in the sequel.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. We we began High Republic and Light of the Jedi talking about Jedi romances where Jedi near near get near attachments. I mean, we know in Padawans are free to go ahead, but here's a knight who can't, or maybe a Wayseeker who can't necessarily. But yeah, we'll see what happens there. Okay, I want to zoom out a little bit before we talk about Ziri and Fantu, talking about Arano, Aram, and the Forever Wars, not just Forever War, because there are also wars that feel like going on forever. Um, unlike with say the Republic, the Jedi and the Nihil, the Jedi and the Path, who are just separate and away from each other, and that'll change with the Battle of Jeddah and that convergence, that collision happening there. Arano and Aram, their proximity is the reason for their conflict, and um, I really and Cordova did such a great job showing this tension through plot, not really through so much through dialogue or through exposition. All this tension over importing resources and connection to the outer rim, even at the beginning, how uh, the supply ship with carrying the ice, much needed water for Arano, uh, and and Ziri can't let it go to Aram, or else they'll lose all the resources because they're desperate because they've been locked in this war. And um, it's such a classic, very human political conflict over resources that then, of course, boils into and explodes into these intensely tribal identities. And there are, of course, these two narratives that narrative that each planet has. It does seem in this cycle of violence that Arano does seem the more aggressive, and also Aram's narrative, at least, often is uh they're trying to be more peaceable, but Arano attacks, and Aram has to respond. And um, the what is it, uh, the ferals and the children of Arano don't actually help. Well, they kind of help prove Aram's point a little bit. These terribly violent activist fanatics on Arano's side, reflecting the entrenched tribal identities. Then Arano's narrative often is Aram violently attacks Arano and their territory and possibly innocent personnel, innocent people, even though Arano was simply acting in their best interest, defending their property, defending their territory. Queen Adriella's poison plot doesn't help matters either. It helps, kind of reinforces Arano's narrative a little bit. Um, yeah, Aram's is far more understandable, I found, but uh, and more subtle. So very reflective human. I get to get in.
Oh no! Oh no! We lost him. Ah, that doesn't look good. Well, yeah. I'll keep going this.
I'm back. Are we back? I don't know if Joel's back, but we'll see what happens there. Anyway, I'll keep going. Arano, they feel like. Oh, here we go. Here's Joel. Sorry, guys. We're
Are we?
back. We're back.
We're
I don't know what
live.
happened there. Who knows what happened there? All good. All good.
Maybe with the rain? No, it happened to you
Yes.
too, right? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So I don't know. It could be good in StreamYards. Anyways, we're back. Everyone's back. Everyone say hi. Um.
We're okay. We're good.
So yeah. So before we get into the real apparel, Joel, talking about the the Forever War itself. What did you think of it? What did you think of that? Just the cycle of violence and those competing narratives.
No, I mean, I think it's interesting. In terms of like kind of the two planets in a war. Sorry, I'm a little puzzled because of like what happened. Like I lost
Yeah, it's good.
we lost our train of thought for a few seconds. It does seem like Arano seems the most aggressive and the most in the wrong. I mean, when you have a poison plot, you kind of lose the moral high ground. Like I don't like I don't know the whole story, but it's sort of like if one side is just using sticks and stones and the other side has a nuclear warhead and tanks, I think we know which one is probably not in the right here and has clearly the advantage. We can make a lot of real world parallels to situations like that where it's
I
like
will in a second. So, but keep going.
tanks versus just people on the streets with nothing to lose. Um, it does seem like Iram has a little bit more than just people on the streets, but it does seem like now that Arano's got the nice weapons and the ships and the poison, and it's like, okay, clearly one of these planets is not in the morally right anymore. If they ever were, and if they were, I think they lost it a long time ago. So you know, there's stuff to answer for, and I found that really interesting. Of like, this is clearly not. It's not like two sides are equal stature. Where like they both have armies and tanks, and like they're kind of both cruddy. Like, it does seem like one planet right now is kind of being the bully on the street yard, and the other is like, maybe you should stop.
I mean, yes, sir.
No, it's like keep going.
So I mean, and it's so tragic because Zuri keeps expressing, and even the narration, the story keeps saying, they had all these partners who were providing resources. They could have had the time and finances to develop more cultivation, maybe climate controls, irrigation, even in the desert, and yet they spend all this time and money and effort on this war because they developed such a military industrial complex around it. Monarch Alberon's power base seems to be run on constant war. They have these elaborate burial rituals that foster this identity that is defined by, we are going to kill Aram, and we have to defend ourselves. We're under the constant threat from this evil empire across the river, across the Jordan River. Yeah, or maybe not the Jordan River. That's not even geographically accurate. Because I mean, I really thought of the Israeli-Palestine conflict and the Intifada, but since the 1967 war, where Israeli troops fought through Jerusalem, and they'd say, "Oh, Jerusalem is our sacred capital, so we're going to go capture it." This isn't exact. There isn't, this isn't like Jeddah. The Battle of Jeddah. Might go into this more, but in terms of narratives about, we're just preserving our interests, I mean, the settlements, especially into the territories, and how those get attacked because of all the ways those settlements disrupt life for Palestinians and make that life so much more difficult and take away opportunities. Israel has done a good job in terms of developing irrigation and resources, but they could do so much more. They could contribute to a more peaceable Middle East. That the prompting of the Intifada, and how terrorist attacks that get launched and rockets getting launched across the walls, and the building of the walls, but suicide bombers and stuff, that doesn't help either. It doesn't help the narrative either. Just reinforces Israel's narrative to some extent. It is this cycle that goes back and forth. One is a more Western military industrial power, and the other is an Arab, Eastern-esque nation that is more under threat, and not just Muslim. There are Christians there too, but yeah, I mean that's the parallel I thought of, in that the lack of trust, the lack of ability for trust. The Pharaohs and the children of Arano very much like the more aggressive factions in Israel. The poison again, the Intifada again doesn't help, but yeah, clearly that certainly helps us read Arano's narrative as the less understandable one. Arano's position as less tenable morally. What did you think of that parallel? what is your response to that?
I mean, I never took Israel Palestine. I kind of just took any, you could
Yeah,
say Pakistan, India in the
sure.
Kashmir conflict, or South Korea. Um, that's kind of the tension there. Um, but I definitely think it's like even just sci-fi stories in general. Like,
Mhm,
here's two planets that have been constantly at war for a gazillion years, and no
mhm.
one knows why anymore. Um,
Right.
kind of a situation. But no, I think there's an interesting parallel to it. I think there'd be a better, more direct point if like Arano has been occupying Arana for like
Yeah,
a long time. It's
true.
like they don't even have a territory anymore. It's just people on the streets. Arano got all the
Mm,
good stuff.
yeah,
So there's that. But yeah, I do think that the poisoning doesn't help, but at the same time, it's like Arano's got the tanks and the weapons and the
mhm.
Star Destroyer. I
These
mean, they don't have
drill
Star,
ships that can just tear through. Yeah,
but there's
why
the
did they
other.
feel the need to have the poison in the first place, right?
Why do the what does the other planet have? I don't know, just like a starfighter. There you go.
They have some fighters, yeah, but they also have just mainly that shield. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's true. Um,
but yeah, but so like, well, one planet is clearly a lot more sympathetic here, and
yeah,
I like them a little bit more.
mhm,
But yeah, but also resources. It's always about resources in some regard.
yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Like
I found it
oil,
very
maybe oil, perhaps
oil.
water. I
Yeah,
mean, water is a big deal in the Middle East.
oil,
As
water,
in
turtles,
North
H2O.
America, we're a lot better. We're
Back to
a lot easier. Yeah,
back to for Star Wars references.
yeah,
But no, yeah, I found that really interesting as well. And it's kind of like, well, is Era not gonna keep sliding more and more to the extreme militancy, like certain countries that we just mentioned are heading to right now with their prime ministers?
yeah.
Or little red dot on my head. Ah, dear.
Mhm.
Um, but or will the princess, or I forget, is that the prince or the princess from the planet? Um,
So it's Ziri Alberon of Erano, Fantuzen of Aram.
Yeah, the princess and princess can like maybe it's time to start reversing the
Mhm.
trend and
Yeah,
kind of reshaping your society to be less militant in general, and that
hmm
might help.
yeah,
So I'll be very curious to see if. Well, actually, no, I think we kind of know already because I think they spoiled it in Phase One.
yeah.
Um,
Sure.
but in terms of like what where that direction goes.
Mhm. Yeah, it's true that Starlight Beacon crashes on Aram because it's there because the conflict isn't over. 150 years later, or reemerges or something. It's a good segue to talk about the princess of Erano and the prince of Aram, Ziri Alberon Fantuzen. So I mentioned how the proximity between those two planets is what causes the conflict, right? Conflict over resources. Um, they're in close quarters, and you're trying to breathing room. Don't want to get there. The way that bursts into ethnic conflict and uh, tribal conflict, their proximity also provides the opportunity for peace. The encounter in Aram's Ocean between these adult children of their monarchs, and that's another part of how this depicts Aram's more peaceable approach, is the way Ziri is treated in the palace on Aram, uh, in the what's it called, Erasmus City, interesting name for it. Uh, yeah, and they're kind of Romeo and Juliet esque. They're literally star-crossed, but they're not exactly lovers. They come up with this plan, say if we get married, then we're going to be in a personal union, and our planets have to be allied and work together. And we draft up this treaty, and they actually have to have to embody this peace that they hope to build. They do grow into the romance. I do think they grow into their bond. I don't know if they necessarily end up kissing at all, but they certainly show tenderness and care for each other, in part I think due to the commitment to peace and to their home worlds. It's nice that it wasn't super lovey-dovey. It's nice that it was more subtle. These are two people who've just met, and there's still a lot of political tension. uh, overriding, undergirding, surrounding them. Um, Loyalty, duty to their parents, to their planets, to peace is really their motivation. But then, yeah, I mean, the connection does emerge. This marks it off from an adult novel. As an adult novel, I think it's more realistic that they aren't just sucking face in the first 5 minutes. um, not that necessarily YA novels would do that either, but uh, I appreciated that it was a little more subtle than that. So, um, I know that that's not too much on Ziri and Fantu as characters. I thought that it was pretty memorable. I really thought Ziri was really cool. Really took charge in the classic vein of Leia and of Padme and of Rey. These young women who stand up and um, even defying her father. And interesting contrast with Axel, in that she wants to escape her father's shadow, not in a way of saying of buckling against it, but in a more morally upright way of saying this legacy of conflict is not serving anyone. I'm going to pursue peace, and we get that from the very beginning. She goes up, and she's going to have that line. She'll be inevitably blamed for. She goes up she's a Captain Alberon of the Aerno Space Force, whatever. She says there's going to be some dust up after this armistice that she'll inevitably be blamed for, even though it wasn't her fault. Um, yeah, I actually I dug her. I thought she was great. And Fantu, he isn't the typical bravado macho hero. He shows a good bit of diplomacy. I really appreciated how he comes from this lower class family. His her birth mother dies, and he's adopted into the royal family. And he doesn't feel entitled. He feels connected to the common people. So that's where his motivation for peace comes from. I really appreciated them. Um, Joel, you say you weren't able. I mean, Axel seemed to have overshadowed a lot of your perspective here. But uh, what are your thoughts on Ziri and Fantu?
Oh yeah, like I said, I don't remember them quite much. I do remember when the proposal for the marriage came, and everyone's like, "What?" But that to me was like, oh, that's kind of traditional medieval
Yeah.
style marriage of. I mean, that's what marriage was back in the day. It's like back in the good old days, marriage wasn't all this lovey-dovey stuff. It was economical. You get your kid for a couple chickens. Or this
Or in this case, for maybe lasting peace, but
everlasting peace and two kingdoms and combined resources.
Mhm.
That's how we did it in the Victorian days too. It's like that's why we married off to the kings and queens of Prussia. But yeah, it makes sense. It's like it's a political marriage between these two people. Maybe they'll fall in love. Maybe they won't. I don't know.
Mhm.
Sometimes love matches can happen.
Yep. They seem
Where
willing to, at least, right?
where their child could become the king of two planets, or maybe
Mhm.
they're divided up between siblings. Although who
Mhm.
knows? Maybe that could just like World War I, that could all be terrible with the
Yep,
three
maybe
cousins.
that's how it falls apart. Who knows?
Just family feud
Mhm.
between the two cousins who are kings or queens of the planet.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't remember too much. I remember just kind of them talking to their parents and being all too, how they're just I don't know, all
Kids these days always going for peace and
we won't war.
concord.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I thought it was an interesting plot point overall, and
Mhm.
I think the fact it wasn't lovey-dovey made sense because it is just a political marriage.
Mhm.
It's kind of duty first and personal
Yeah.
second. With that's how kind of monarchs are supposed to behave.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I thought the plot line was interesting enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that's the one I don't have much to say on, sadly.
That's fair. Again, who knows? We'll see. Hopefully, see more of them. Are they in the Battle of Jeddah cast? I can't quite remember.
I
But
don't think so.
yeah, it's yeah. I mean, clearly, the treaty is hopefully going to be worked out on Jeddah. In theory, it's good to know the wedding actually does happen in this novel. So at least that much. Except Axel almost ruins it all, which we'll see. Because he's um again, whether or not he admits it, he's under the spell, the sway of the mother and the path of the open hand. Talk about this group that continues to amaze, continues to be really intriguing. One of the probably the most interesting contributions of all
Mhm.
of, I mean, all of High Republic, but just very quickly. We've had them what for 2 or 3 novels so far, a young adult novel in this, and they're already incredibly fascinating. Um, they look and act more like the Nile in this novel than in Path of Deceit. At least like in the Fallen Star, they lurk in the shadows. The way they retreat to the Gazer Electric, and um, the mothers they're on the Gazer Electric pulling the strings, just like Markian. There is none of Marta's flowers or her convictions about the Force and about non-interference and whatnot. That's a little bit through Axel, but not really. Even he's not a believer the way Marta is. Serena and them and all the other the other path characters aren't necessarily, but they're the children of the mother, um in that more active kind of like Yana is. Yeah, so I definitely, but still, it's another interesting look at them and how they work. Very quiet, very subtle, not full blown. I expected them to be more full blown, but I like the way they were just slightly in the background, not really like using a very deft touch to try and set things off course. Maybe the fact that they fail is why they get to be more aggressive at the Battle of Jeddah. We'll see. Again, great show, not tell. Even the dialogue, they don't go into why they care, why they're there. It's just even the silent actions of characters. The narration of Serena hacking the starfighter at the beginning, just this leaving the signal dampener on the moon. The little subtle pinpricks that they're trying to make. And then the mother, she really has everyone begging for scraps. Yeah, she knows. The thing is with Axel, she knows he wants to create chaos. She knows he wants to ignore the pain, ignore his suffering, paint it over through alcohol, through gambling, through whatever. Not that gambling is inherent, not that those things are inherently evil, but the excesses of those things, um, the disaster level of those things. And he says, "Okay, well, here's an opportunity." She says, "Here's an opportunity. Sow some chaos, cause some heck, uh, wreak some havoc, and yeah, my chaos. This is the role you play. This is your place in the galaxy. Axel Greylark is to just cause chaos. This is how you stick it to your mother and stick it to, your ex girlfriend or whoever. So yeah, again, lots to love about the mother here and the path itself. Again, very much quiet behind the scenes, but again, Joel, continue to riff on how much you love the mother in this.
Oh yeah, she's great. I love her. She's got such presence, such a presence to her. I love the kind of cult feeling
Mhm,
about her. This is one of those things where I think again, reading Path of Deceit first really helped kind of just get me to understand what the Path of the Open Hand is all about. Because like Path of Deceit already does all the heavy lifting of like this is
mhm,
what the Path of the Open Hand's about. It's what their whole thing is. It's the mother. It's what she's kind of all about, and now you kind of see them. Okay, here they are, kind of in action, doing their
mhm,
dastardly deeds. Ooh, excuse me. But yeah, I mean, just lovers. They kind of like oh, and then they never angry or upset. Kind of like you hear them yell or scream when something
mhm.
goes wrong. She's kind of like a mother. She's kind of just got that. Ooh,
Yeah.
you don't want to disappoint mother. Um, kind of attitude to it. And so it's really cool, and I like it. I kind of like the pass of the. I kind of hope that the pass of the open hands finds its way to phase three. I want the
Mhm.
mother to like be secretly frozen in carbonite, and then she comes back in phase three 100 years later.
That'll be interesting. Yeah.
Um, but no, it's like it's really interesting to see where this is all goes right
Mhm,
now. And just what obviously they're kind of the precursor to the Nile. So I
mhm,
wonder like what kind of the what happens to them to where they kind of get off the Republic and the Jedi's radar. Because it's actually something I've been thinking about in terms of the scale of the whole High Republic initiative era.
mhm.
Is ultimately you can't. Well, you can. Nothing says you can't. contradict there hasn't been a full scale war since the formation of the Republic. Like the
True.
Clone Wars is supposed to be this galactic conquest that just affects everything. Like even Coruscant got attacked, and Coruscant wasn't attacked in over 1,000 years. Like the last big threat to the galaxy obviously was the Sith and their empires and whatever that last big destructive war that I like to imagine happened. So it's sort of like, is the Nile and the paths of the open hand? We think it's a big thing because that's how the story is telling us. Like if because if you tell a story kind of like in a small kind of scale, like here's like it's big here, it's like in the grand scheme of things, it's like local conflict. Like it's like you watch a movie about a local conflict in a country far, far away. It's like not World War II where everything's being affected. Not that I don't want to take away from the hurt and pain that those conflicts have, obviously. So again, it's sort of like, well, what gets the path of the open hand off of the Jedi and the Republic's radar, and obviously what the Nile quickly eventually must dissipate soon because obviously, they're kind of the Republic got another couple hundred years of good times ahead of it before the Clone Wars, so it kind of makes you wonder. It's like, well, how big did things really get before things kind of get ended?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, kind of like what I was saying with Arano and Aram, the path of the Nile, they feel big because they're the big bad of the High Republic. But yeah, I mean, what's their significance overall if this doesn't become a full scale war? Like, I don't think it should. You're right. I mean, my instinct to answer is to say the big implications is what does this mean for the Jedi, and how do they proceed to retrench and just shirk back in fear, staying like I was saying before. This is they try and be more activists, try and go out and help people and handle situations, be more sensitive and caring, and then they get slapped for it by the Nile, and they retreat, say no, we can't, got to go back. They refuse, they forget to trust in the Force and trust in the light side, and actually just retrench and say no, we're going to trust in the Republic instead and serve the Senate instead. And that large scale thing, interestingly enough, though you bring this up, Charles Soule's Star Wars Ongoing comic. Oh no, is it them or is it yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Luke, Leia, and what's her name? Oh goodness gracious me. In Leia's friend in Last Jedi.
Holdo?
Here I go again. Yeah, Emil and Holdo. Yeah, I think it's them, or is it Afra and Santa? I can't remember. In the Afra comic, they come across a Nile ship, and and I think Luke is all, the Nile, weren't they just a myth? Did they exist? Or somebody says something like that, and it's like yeah, they've receded from memory, receded from history. There's a theory that they become the Night Riders, or not the Night Riders, the like shoot, in Solo, the Marauders in Solo. Yeah, those guys who are who of course are become part of the Rebel Alliance and are actually protagonists in that era. But yeah, it's a great question that I'm gonna watch out for, especially in Phase 3. We'll see.
I do wonder, like, how much the general public is even watching this whole Nile thing. It's like, is this a big deal in the galaxy, or is this just a big deal to the Jedi and everyone else is like, just stay on course. Yep.
Yeah.
And then it's like, or is there going to be like a conspiracy where it's like the Jedi like start kind of retracting the records? What Nile? There's no Nile. I don't know what you're talking about. We don't talk about Nile here. So it's like,
yeah.
What happened? What went on? I mean, I know 1,000 years is a long time, but still.
I mean, the one thing I'll say is the destruction of Starlight Beacon is a big deal. And Markian taking responsibility for that. You want to talk about terrorism and ISIS and all that, yeah, Markian broadcasting to the galaxy, look at that, I did that, look at us, how terrible we are. But I mean that's the thing, redacting, just like someone erases Camino. I mean, it's Dooku erases Camino. People can erase the memory of Starlight Beacon, and the failure, because the failure makes the Jedi look bad. So yeah, it's again, great question. Something I trust they will address in Phase 3. I don't know if they'll address it in the Acolyte. It would be nice if at least Leslie Headland's thinking of kind of bring something in. Again, we don't know how much it's going to connect or not, but
I just
I,
kind of curious, like again, in the whole Star Wars isn't one story angle
yeah,
of like, how does this fit in the wider Star Wars history? Like,
yeah.
like
I mean,
kind of
clearly, again, the answer is it's why the Jedi retreat and become
right.
generals and clones, but how and why and what's leading to that, and what are the tensions leading to that? With I think with Kiev and then ultimately Dooku. Yeah, it's a great question. More questions for future and what this raises for the Battle of Jeddah, which comes out in 2.5 hours. Yeah, around there. I'm gonna probably hopefully be asleep by then, but we'll see. And so Battle of Jeddah by George Mann, Cataclysm by Lydia Kang that comes out in April. Will the treaty succeed? To what extent will the treaty succeed? For how long? For what time? Or will it not at all completely fail? Is that what sparks the Battle of Jeddah? I suspect that has more to do with the path intervening and disrupting the peace and becoming more activist, saying they failed with Arano and Aram. And so they actually have to go explicitly on the offensive, such as the way they do in the Rising Storm, for example, and of course the Fallen Star. I mean, as opposed to say the hyperspace disaster, where it's kind of an accident. I mean, they enjoy it, they take advantage of it, but it was a bit of an accident that their paths converge with the ship's normal hyperspace. But yeah, in this case, I wonder if they're going to be say, oh yeah, we failed. The quiet approach failed. We got to succeed with the more overt propaganda war, but also maybe more overt war. We'll see. Another question though is why did they care about, like I raised at the top? Why did the path actually care about continuing the forever war? Why did Serena try and hijack or reprogram the plane of the ship in the first place? Why is Axel brought on to actually create more chaos? I do think they want to create chaos. They want to show the Republic and the Jedi, or show the galaxy the Republic and the Jedi aren't as strong. I think they want to use this as an example, that they can't control the Force or can't control it as benevolently as they claim. Because we know, I mean, Molo arrives on the scene, the Jedi arrive on the scene. They want to see this as Gilla and Creighton's son and them and Charles Roy. They want to see this as use this as an example of, hey, look, the Jedi can go out, the Republic can go out and create peace. We know Molo wants to secure his position with Greylark. Say, yeah, I'm going to be the activist chancellor who is actually going to bring peace and actually bring peace to the Outer Rim. And so the fact that they start to succeed, it's a big win for them, and that's partly again why this feels bigger than just a localized conflict. It's an example. It's propaganda in the not in the negative sense, but just in the it's messaging, right?
Right.
So that's my thought. Another question is, again, they talk about fixing Axel. Yeah, and he's pretty broken at the end of Convergence. But is this a way that opens up new possibilities in Cataclysm? We'll see. I don't know, Joel. If you have any thoughts on those questions? If are there other questions that Convergence opens up for the rest of High Republic Phase 2 and even Phase 3?
Yeah, I mean, activist governments, what's this is definitely a question to ask. It's like what's different between activist governments and imperialism? It's
Right.
like we're gonna invade a country because we want to bring democracy because because democracy is epic. We're America. America. America.
Yeah.
America. America. Spread American values, whether you
Mission
want them or
accomplished.
not. Exactly. It's sort of that. Not that I think trying to bring peace is always a good thing.
Mhm.
All the stuff with the Nile, the past, it just kind of makes me wonder what are the Sith doing right now? Are they just looking at all this like, dang, we don't have to do anything. Let's just relax and just take a nice smoothie while we sit in Scarab beaches and just
Yeah.
let things just unfold and we'll just sit around. Like, what are they doing?
Mhm.
What like that? And maybe that's obviously I think what Acolyte's going to answer. Hopefully, if anything, it's like, what were
Mhm.
the Sith doing this whole time? It's like,
Yeah.
well, got the Nile doing sissy things and the passive open hand being all manipulative and starting proxy wars and spreading chaos. It's like you're doing the Sith jobs for them, pretty much. That's always
Yeah.
it's always a question in terms of why the Jedi care. It's like I mean, I would just hope it's just because the Jedi think they're good guys and they just
True.
want to help out where they can. See
Mhm.
poor two planets in trouble, and getting worse and worse. Maybe they decide, let's try and do something about
Mhm.
it. I mean, obviously, I think the Chancellor see like, oh, another member for the New Republic and all the benefits that could come
Yeah.
with that.
The Old
So
Republic.
the Old Republic, all right, the
That
Galactic
Republic.
Republic,
That
High
one.
Republic.
Yeah.
It's like the Republic in general. So it's like a little bit of a, yeah, kind of a interesting,
Mhm.
an interesting kind of thing there. No,
Yeah.
Thomas Bolzer. I don't think the Sith are looking for eternal life. Palpatine and Plagueis are. I don't know if all of them are. I don't think. I think that's just a
Yeah.
Palpatine Plagueis thing.
I mean, they might be at this point. Who knows? But we don't know.
We
Well,
don't know.
and interesting because we know Markian's lightsaber is likely Kevmo's. It's not from a Sith. It's not from whatever. I mean, it's a yellow lightsaber. It's likely Kevmo's. He got from great grandma. So there you go.
Right.
One interesting thing I want to show everyone. I didn't fully realize. I did realize a little bit. This is a question of Gela and Axel, and kind of Gela fixing Axel here. Especially the adult novels form this interesting diptych where you have the yellow bands, the blue, and then the purple. And I mean, here's Axel with a purple lightsaber that looks a lot like Gela's and a blaster. And so, usually you see someone holding a lightsaber and it is they're more, and that isn't red. Usually it's more on the light side. I mean, we know of the lore with Mace Windu's thing, but um, this image is from Little Boy here on Reddit, from the High Republic subreddit. Um, yeah, and talking about, yeah, I mean, less so the young adult novels more subtly form a bit of a diptych, but especially the adult novels there um, form this kind of this really neat parallel. Clearly, that was intentional. Yeah, so we'll see. See how the two novels interact with each other and how Battle of Jeddah. It seems to be this lynch point. This Battle of Jeddah. That yeah.
I'm a little concerned for myself that I didn't finish Quest for the Hidden City, and I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, should I finish that before listening to Battle of Jeddah? Like, I don't know. I hope.
Well,
I mean,
can
I'm
you
not reading the
finish it in two
comics.
and a half hours? Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
reading the comics either, so
Mhm.
that's I can't. I'm trying to focus on the books.
Yeah.
So
Fair enough.
I'm genuinely curious as like what I'm gonna miss out on here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Tractor Beam will have you covered a little bit if you want to know. Just yeah, there was. Yeah. Sorry, I would just say, yeah. Well, I mean, actually, I wonder. Here's the thing. This is a question: is with High Republic, have they done a better job phase 2 of bringing people up to speed in the different media? You mentioned, having read Path of Deceit, you get what the Path of the Open Hand are so much more. I'd be curious to see someone who has read Convergence without reading Path of Deceit, if they have a sense at least of what they're on about. I do think Battle of Jeddah is probably gonna have to go into it because on Jeddah people are more explicitly religious about, or more explicit about what their beliefs are in the Force, and so it is this meeting place. It is this place of convergence and collision, and like we say, this light colliding, probably at the Battle of Jeddah. Very curious to see what happens there. All right. Before we end, Joel, do you have any kind of further thoughts, any closing thoughts on Convergence? Would you recommend it, etc.?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I recommend it. I'm sure people would like it. Again, I would highly recommend reading Path of Deceit first. I think you'll get a lot more out of it before reading Convergence. So far it seems like Quest of the Hidden City is enough of a small enough story where it doesn't feel like I'm missing much.
Mhm.
Unless those characters show up in something like Battle of Jeddah.
I think
Um,
Solandra does show up in Battle of Jeddah. So
okay, well, the comics right now seem very detached from what those three stories, but that's again on
yeah,
Jeddah, so
yeah, that's the
uh,
thing. The comics are definitely going to play in. I really think so. I definitely,
there's
yeah.
that. But no, I recommend it. It's definitely an interesting story, and just read Path of Deceit first. Quite frankly, that's my only advice
Yeah.
for anybody.
Again, the more I think about this book, the more I consider, yeah, the more I'm really satisfied again with the way it really holds together way better. I think not way better, but a lot better than other adult novels, which all more complex. And this is complex. There is a lot of moving pieces weaving around, but again, the way she focuses on these four characters, younger, not young, younger, hopeful for the future, but also clear about their responsibility to the past, and the need to innovate on the past. I definitely appreciate it. I enjoyed it. Definitely recommend it as well. Yeah, before we end, Joel, you had one last thing, and we're maybe kind of pioneering a new little segment here. One last thing. Go, Joel. Go for it.
Yes, 2023. So I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to predict that sometime this year in one of the shows, so I can cover my butt, on which one I think we're going to see Mon Mothma again this year. I don't know what show, but I think we're going to see her and played by Genevieve O'Reilly one
Mhm.
more time.
I want to say an Ahsoka for some reason.
Maybe, well, I
Only,
mean, Hera's got
yeah,
connections, so
yeah. It seems to be the one most tied in with the Skywalker saga. Obviously, Ahsoka is a Skywalker. Let's not fool ourselves. Um, Tied into maybe what's happening on Coruscant and on Chandrila and everything Luke is up to, potentially connecting also back to Leia. So again, it's possible. If that happened, I'd love it. That could just be a cold take. Um, Guest character appearance, yeah, we'll see. I'm gonna say my prediction for the Sana Staros comic is that references to her ancestors, uh oh goodness, the kid in phase one, especially just see a Justina Ireland character. This is a Justina Ireland comic. I think that's a good bet that there's gonna be some. I mean, we know her brother, her father is
yeah.
in it. So looking forward to that book. It's one of those surprising announcements that, uh, yeah, but I'm appreciating. She's a great character. She has a great story in the latest Doctor Afra comic. So that'll be an interesting one too. Okay, Joel, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Nope, good book. I'm gonna try and see how far I can get into the Quest for the Hidden City before doing the Battle of Jeddah. Maybe I'll
Hmm.
just have to reread the Quest for the Hidden City and doing Battle of Jeddah because that's probably gonna be our next big one.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, excitement and and Bad Batch. Bad Batch is
Yes.
coming. We excited. Yay, Bad
Yeah.
Batch.
Willow
Bad
episode
the back
6,
and
Bad
trash.
Batch episode 1, season 2 episode 1.
Yep.
That's gonna be fun. Yeah, the return of Eyes on Screen. It's coming. Coming
Woo!
back. There we go. And I will say one more last thing about that is,
Mhm.
Clone Wars. I keep saying Clone Wars is my favorite TV series of all time. I'm really excited for the way season 2 of Bad Batch is going to pick up on clones and themes in Clone Wars and characters. Definitely more of Rex, more of Cody, more of what happened to the clones. And so Clone Wars season 9. Why not? Here we go.
Yay! I'm excited for Bad
There we
Batch. So
go.
yeah.
There we go.
Yay.
Okay, I think it's a good time to wrap things up. One and a half hours. It's not bad. Yeah, thank you for joining us, everyone. If you liked what you saw, liked what you heard, disliked what you heard, fair enough. Comment below, or let us know on
Tell us
Twitter,
why we're
Instagram.
wrong.
Pardon?
Tell us why we're
Tell
wrong.
us why we're wrong. Tell us why we're out to lunch. Take us out to
Mhm.
lunch at Celebration. Sure, why
Mhm.
not? Or New York Comic Con or wherever. Yeah, and let us know what you think. Who might show up in, who might make a cameo in a show in a live action show, specifically in 2023. Again, follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Ion Cannon Pod. Yeah, we'll do click that there. Twitter, Instagram at Ion Cannon Pod. Please do this. Give this video a like and a share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Give us a like, give us a check out on the Star Wars Underworld Facebook page. Yeah, and then please do give this video a like and a share. Thanks for joining us also on the Underworld Facebook page, on Twitch, on Underworld Twitter, and Ion Cannon Twitter. Joel, where can they find you?
First of all, I just saw this in the comments. I hate to, but it's like, they have Disney Plus, but they haven't watched Clone Wars. Why should I watch it, even though it's a comic or a cartoon? I feel like I'm missing something. It's great TV. It's a lot of fun. Lots of deep lore and themes of Star Wars. And there's just a lot of stuff that a lot of the newer stuff is building upon from the start with the Clone Wars. So, yeah. And oh wow, you saw Star Wars 77 on the big screen. Nice. Very nice. But yeah, that's why I would say
my answer is because George Lucas brought all his storytelling powers from 1977 Star Wars, and he put them in a smaller screen, unanimated, and because it looks so beautiful, to push the envelope on what animation can do. Season 7 especially looks as good as a blockbuster live action film, I will say. Like Joel said, it dives in deeper. Ahsoka is the all-time great television character. So give it a shot. Push through the first season. Give the first season a go. Push through towards the end. It really picks up. And then season 2, you're off and running. Just give it a shot. It's on Disney Plus, so go for it.
Yeah. As for I am, you can find me at JID 2021. Again, JID 2021 on Twitter, or of course at the Ion Cannon Pod. Again, Ion Cannon Pod. Oh, and thank you for always following us, and Han shot first. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric Rob.
Yes. Thank you so much for that engagement, for that love. You can follow me on Twitter at NAUG485, on Instagram at MNEUG1138. Get some Willow thoughts, some soccer thoughts, some Star Wars thoughts, all of the above. Of course, at Ion Cannon Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And of course, we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Tonight's episode will go up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts shortly, and then Tractor Beam on Fridays. I think that's about it. Next week we're taking a break. I got to pick my parents from the airport. We haven't taken our break yet. We've gone through the holiday season, and so we're just gonna take a break and then come back in 2 weeks with a retrospective, because we're coming up to a year and episode 50, and so it'll be good to just look back when we think about canon, think about podcasting, or think about different diving the deep discussions on the lore of canon and the High Republic of the galaxy far, far away. All right, again, thank you so much, everyone, for in the chat and in the comments. Sorry we can't get to everything, but we do appreciate it as always. Joel, for now, let's blow this thing and head home.